To create the COVID data source, we will complete 3 steps, namely 1, union the 2 spreadsheets for 2020 and 2021 into a single file, processing the combined file to get rid of unnecessary columns, and using the combined file without the unnecessary columns to create 3 separate files, 1 for Hillsborough, 1 for Pasco, and 1 for Pinellas. And we will use Prep Builder for all of these tasks. Now, before we start, it's useful to point out that the 2 spreadsheets have slightly different column headers. You see the 2020 data has a column field object ID, all in capitals, but that appears to be empty, and it uses object ID 2 as an index into the various cases. If you look at 2021, we'll see that it has no object ID column, and that it uses object ID rather than object ID 2 as the index. Now, if we're going to union the files, stick all of these rows together in a single file, then we first need to make sure that the column headers are the same. So we're going to add the 2020 data into Prep Builder. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the object ID column, and we're going to add a clean step to rename object ID 2. It's a large file, so this may take a little while before we get there. So here it is, and we can navigate to object ID 2, rename it to, and it's now called object ID. Now what we're going to do is we're going to connect to the 2021 data, which already has the same column names, and then we can union the two by moving the 2021 data over the 2020 data after the clean step. You see this union box come up, and we'll drop it on union. And you see that that changes the flow. Now, you'll see that there are some unnecessary columns in this. For example, since we have age, we don't need age group. And it appears that case underscore is always yes, and that case 1, event date, and chart date are all the same. So we're going to add a clean step to get rid of the columns that we don't need. So I go to the list view, and then I get rid of table names, I get rid of age group, I can get rid of case, I can get rid of case 1, and I can get rid of chart date. Okay, so if I now go back to the profile pane, then you'll see that I have far fewer columns now. So this looks all good. The next step we want to do is use this to create 3 separate .csv files, 1 for Hillsborough, 1 for Pasco, and 1 for Pinellas. So I'm going to add another clean step here, and I'm going to filter on Hillsborough. And you see I now only have the Hillsborough cases. And then I'm going to add an output step so that we can write this to a .csv file. And we will call that, and you see we've done Hillsborough already, so let's call this Hillsborough 2 then. And I have no idea why it keeps asking me to give it the same information, but it is what it is. All right, so now I can run this flow, and I should get a file eventually that will be called Hillsborough 2. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is add an additional clean step here, and then we will filter on Pasco. Again, you see we get only the Pasco cases, and then I can add an output step here. So that I'm going to make this a .csv file that we will call Pasco. This is irritating, but it is what it is. All right, so now we can run this flow and we create the file pasco.csv, and then we're going to add yet another clean step here where we will filter for Pinellas. And as we did before, we will add an output step, and we will call this Pinellas. I have no idea how often I'm going to have to type in Pinellas. All right, eventually it accepts it, and now I can run this flow too. And now I have 3 files, one for Hillsborough, one for Pinellas, and one for Pasco, and we'll use them in the next step to start building some visualizations.